let's head to Kenya, where the country played host to corporate and government leaders and development finance institutions as well at the Business Transforming Africa conference this week. Now, delegates debated the need to attract the continent's talent from the diaspora, invest in strategic training initiatives, and set up workforce analytics. They agreed on a need for initiatives to develop effective and influential leaders that impact the continent's growth and empower local businesses to become globally competitive and sustainable. Well, joining me in the studio is Wilkus van Vuuren. He's the Managing Director of HR Advisory at the African Management Services Company, which of course are the event organizers. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you. It's a pleasure
Mr. Van
to be here.
Vuuren. Now tell me more about the challenges you saw in African business that made you start this conversation.
Uche, it's very interesting. We've been doing work in Africa for the past 27 years. But originally when AMSCO was started, we focused on expat management. And the reason we started doing that was there was a need, especially amongst SMMEs, small and medium enterprises, to bring in expert managers to help to grow their businesses. But as we started to do more of this work, we found that there's an increased need within those organizations to assist them in recruiting the right talent at various levels within the business, but also assist them with training and development. And the training and development is really across two levels: your typical management and leadership development, but also technical and vocational skills. That was a desperate need for a lot of the companies that we engage with. And finally, we also found that more and more companies were asking us to assist them in establishing basic governance and policies and procedures and structures within their organizations to allow them to capacitate themselves for growth.
Now, according to the World Economic Forum, it says the fourth industrial revolution is coming, and that will require us to have better skilled, especially considering the fact that we'll have fast-paced technological progress and, of course, other socio-economic and demographic changes. Now, how do you see this affecting Africa's labor market? Do you think the continent is ready for this fourth industrial revolution?
I think in many cases the answer is yes. We find that there's a lot of innovative thinking on the continent. A lot of these technology companies that you're talking about actually have their roots in Africa. The challenge does, however, fit into the space where we look at the technical skills that we need to continuously grow these businesses. Right. So as much as you have an entrepreneur or an innovator that starts an organization, we also need capacity of the technical skills. But it's not an insurmountable challenge. It's actually quite an easy challenge to sort out. What we are working with a lot of organizations on is actually bringing expert technical talent from the rest of the world, from Europe and from the US, and actually through an apprenticeship system, allow them to work with local talent and develop their skills so that they can continue to do the work into the future. What's maybe a concern that sits in the back of all this technological development is the effect that that might have on employment. We know that inevitably, as technology develops as fast as it does, we will have increased levels of unemployment. So how do we start to look at creating jobs for the youth, but also looking at alternative methods of dealing with extreme poverty, such as a minimum wage or a living wage across the board for people within the different geographies?
Now, there's another factor that also comes in, which is the fact that a lot of economies across the continent are slowing down in light of the falling commodity prices and such. Is the African diaspora, you talk about the African diaspora coming back, encouraging them to come back. Are they ready to come back with the state Africa's economies are in right now?
Which I think the nice thing around that, or the positive, is at least we have growth. So let's be very honest about it. As much as the growth is slowing down in Africa, we have growth. In most of the West and in Europe, we don't have any economic growth at this stage. So it becomes almost inevitable, I think, that the diaspora that will return. What that means for African companies and organizations is to ensure that we create an environment and a climate to attract the diaspora through things like succession planning, rethinking our pay and remuneration structures, looking at our policies and procedures to make it an attractive option for them. But more and more, we're still seeing, even in the light of the slowdown in the economy, that there's a lot of desire and also a need for the diaspora to return to their countries of origin.
And certainly you had a conference today, so give me some feedback. What was some of the feedback you got, not just from the private sector, but the government as well on this particular issue?
A very positive feedback. I think what was very encouraging for me out of the conference today is the willingness of government as well as the private sector to establish public-private partnerships. More and more there's a realization that if we start to think systemically about some of these economic challenges on the continent, we need government and the private sector to work together. Right. One example of that might be working together in ensuring that we provide the right type of learning and the right type of skills for our youth, as I was mentioning earlier. So for me, that was the biggest positive that came out of the conference today. How do we all work together? As I said in the conference in my closing remarks today, alone we can't do it, but if we stand together, we can. These challenges are definitely not insurmountable.
Well, many thanks for joining us in the studio with more insight into that conference. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Of course, that was Wilkus van Vuuren. He's the MD at Africa's Management Services Company.